Welcome to the NHL Wraparound podcast featuring Neil Smith, President General Manager of the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, and longtime ESPN NHL veteran Vic Morren. Together, they share no-nonsense opinions on news and issues around the National Hockey League. Whether you're a casual or diehard fan, each episode of NHL Wraparound will leave you more informed. Now, here's your hosts, Neil and Vic.
When the clock hit 000 on June 14th, 1994 and signaled the end of a 54-year championship drought, emotions intersected at joy and relief. In the coming days, weeks, months, and years, this single title has continued to resonate with fans and the franchise alike. Once the New York Rangers gets into your DNA, it becomes a lifestyle, an emotional part of one's being. Join Neil and me as NHL Wraparound presents the fifth and final episode of 1990 Forever, sponsored by My Gray and the Game 7 Group. This show, Reflection, features accounts from team members, the media, and fans 3 decades later on how that championship has impacted their lives.
From Howe to Hughes, from Bellevue to Bedard, we're your source for game worn jerseys. Go to mygray.com, MEIGRAY.com to start your collection today. Get real. Get it from MyGray.
And welcome to 1990 Forever Reflection with the architect of the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers and the president and GM, Neil Smith. And also joining us, you know him as the CEO of our first sponsor, My Gray, but Barry Meisel, also an author and covered the Rangers during the 1994 playoff run for the New York Daily News. Both of you, welcome.
Thanks, Vic.
Good to have Barry on the show, finally.
We all started as fans at some time or another, most of us probably during the 60s. And, you know, Neil, I'll start with you, that when you started out as a fan, as a young boy, did you ever dream that your life in hockey was going to be highlighted by the remarkable championship your team won in 94?
No, I could never have imagined that as a kid growing up in the 60s in Toronto. And my first love, of course, was Toronto Maple Leafs, but there was a 6-team league. And I was 13 years old when it became 12 teams. And you really didn't imagine that you could make it to the NHL because everybody was playing hockey in Toronto, and you know it was a dream, but you fulfilled that dream on the driveway with a tennis ball and your buddies, and you played road hockey all the time. To imagine that kid thinking that he could ever have been part of something this magnificent would be really unrealistic back then.
Barry, what are your first memories as a fan?
Well, I grew up in the Blue Seats, and I remember the first time actually predating the Blue Seats in the old Garden, the one on 8th Avenue. My first recollection when I walked out and I saw the white ice and the blue jerseys, I was hooked. So I come from a place where, almost from birth, from the time I was 8 years old, being a Ranger fan, remembering crying after the 72 finals, crying after the 74 finals, and though being so excited after Game 6 against the Flyers when we forced the Game 7, and then wanting to be a sports writer in part because I loved hockey, I loved sports, I loved writing, and I thought this would be a great career. And as an intern in college, my first NHL game I covered was Game 5 of the 79 finals. So here's a kid from Brooklyn, loving the Rangers, doing his journalism homework between periods at the Garden, and here I am now covering the Rangers for the New York Daily News.
I'm going to tell you that as a fan, I cried exactly those two games that you mentioned. Game 6 against the Bruins in 72 and after the Flyers in 74. And I never cried after a game since then, except actually once. I cried when Ray Bork finally won for Colorado in 2001. And I think me, Steve Levy, John Saunders, we were all up there and it was so emotional. But, just going back to what you said, I started watching the game in 68 as well. And I walked out of the Garden. It was a game against the Oakland Seals and I was hooked right away. And so, as I mentioned in the open, this franchise, it gets into your DNA at such an early age. And no matter what happens, it's always there. So, as part of this final show today, we want to get to hear from more than just the players that were involved. We want to get, of course, more players in, but we want to hear from media and the fans. But we're going to start with some clips from the Ranger organization. And let's start with longtime MSG color analyst, John Davidson.
I'm often asked all these years later about 1994 and what it meant to me. It was bigger than just, it was everything, because the loyalty of the Ranger fans for generation after generation after generation finally had a chance to be a winner along with their team. For me to stay in the hockey business and move forward with all the different jobs I've been involved with, you can always go back and think of that team, how it was built, the character and characters that were on the team, the leadership and how everybody was treated. It's like a roadmap for life. Also, what was really important to me was having my family in New York and having two young daughters, and then growing up, they deal with their children going through things. And they talk about being a part of 1994 when we get out the scrapbook and look at all the photos and the young girls hugging this cup and all this type of stuff. So in essence, it affects every aspect of your life, everything. No one knows what it's like unless you've lived it, being in New York and being part of a sports franchise that has bad days and then has the ultimate greatest day ever. It's a roadmap for life. And I just say thanks for that. Thank you, New York.
Hi, I'm Barbara Dan Faraci. I was executive assistant to Neil Smith during the 1994 New York Rangers Stanley Cup Championship. 1994 left a permanent mark in my heart, mind, and soul, as I still remember every moment of that year. The NHL All-Star Weekend at Madison Square Garden and the endless roller coaster that was the 1994 Stanley Cup playoffs. I was very fortunate to have a front row seat along with all the amazing players, coaches, trainers, and staff that I still hold dear in my heart today.
Lynn Marsky here, longtime Madison Square Garden employee and New York Ranger fan. When you ask me what that 1994 championship team meant to me the most, the first thing that comes to my mind is what it did for our great fans. The fans that had been with the Rangers for a long, long decades of frustration. The fans that stuck with them, good teams, bad teams. The fans that finally came to their ultimate reward. They got to see their team hoist that cup around the ice at the Garden. And not only did it mean everything to the players, the management, and the people who worked at Madison Square Garden, but it meant even more to the people, the fans who had supported that club for such a long time. That's what it meant to me the most.
Hi, my name is Don Solomon. I've been with the New York Rangers as their team dentist for the past 39 years. For me, that 94 Cup winning season was the culmination of a lot of people's hard work. But more than that, for me, it was the cohesiveness of that team, the inclusivity of that team that made everybody feel like one unit. We were all brought along with Mess to ride that magic ride all the way to the Cup. All the parties, all the joy that it brought New York was great. But for me personally, on the inside, it was being made to feel part of that team. And now when I see these guys and when I get together with people from 94, it's just special. And it's always going to be that way. And I want to thank you, Neil, because of you, I have a Stanley Cup ring that I will cherish forever. So thank you so much. Thank you, New York Rangers.
Hi, I'm Matt Loughran. I served as the Rangers Director of Team Operations from 1986 to 1997. 11 seasons, all of which I'll cherish, but none more than 1993-94, the year we won the Stanley Cup. I was so fortunate to be able to be a part of such a incredible experience, an experience that included fantastic people around me at work, staff members, players, media members, and fans, all of whom I will remember with great fondness. And it's amazing how quickly it goes. 30 years in the blink of an eye. Time just flies by, but the memories last forever. And as Sam Rosen said, this one will last a lifetime, and it certainly has. Happy to be here and happy to be celebrating this 30-year anniversary. Thank you.
My name is Mike Hartman. I played for the 1994 Stanley Cup Championship team, New York Rangers, and to this day, it's been so special. I believe that life is built on relationships, and I've met some of the greatest people within the New York Rangers organization and the staff and the players and the personnel that meant so much to me. Also meeting Neil Smith when I was 15 years old. Neil was a scout for the Detroit Red Wings, and he took the time to talk to me. And next thing you know, I'm winning the Stanley Cup with Neil, who helped me out as a young hockey player. Growing up in Oak Park, Michigan, Mark Messier was a hero of mine since I was a little kid, and to play with one of the best leaders ever to play hockey and to play with your idol is so special, and ended up winning the Stanley Cup with Mark. And the New York Rangers adding my name to the Stanley Cup and having Neil and the players and the staff fighting to get me on there. I mean, I don't have words to really explain how that feels. To this day, I'm so appreciative and grateful.
Hi. Wow. I can't believe it's been 30 years since the New York Rangers won the Stanley Cup in 1994. My name is Amy Kay, and back at that time, I was the Senior Vice President of Human Resources for the Rangers, along with Madison Square Garden and its other teams and properties. I've been invited here today to talk about what the impact has been on my life having the Rangers win the Cup. And I must say, it truly has had an impact. What I got to be part of and what I witnessed was how when people set a goal and they work together with focus and passion and determination, that you can get whatever it is you're going for. Since leaving the Garden, I started my own business, Stage and Consulting, where I still work in sports. And I have to say that one of the marks I hope I left was that 30 years ago, when there were very few women that were executives in the sports industry, I was one of the women who was treated just like her counterparts. So I have to thank you, Neil Smith, and the Ranger organization for my beautiful Stanley Cup ring. I love it, I cherish it, and I wish you all the best. See you in another 30 years.
Neil, that's quite a tribute that players and people from within the organization alike are so thankful for you for just being a part of 1994.
Well, we were able to accomplish a number of things in the years leading up to the Stanley Cup and obviously the Stanley Cup season. And one of them was being all inclusive to everyone in the organization and really everyone that worked at MSG. It was really an intentional thing that to motivate people to be part of the organization, be part of the wins, part of the losses, smile and cry along with the players and the coaches and the management, whether you were in PR or you were in marketing or you were like Amy Kay doing human resources for the entire Madison Square Garden. You wanted to make those folks all feel part of it and all feel important. And I've said this many times, Vic, I've said it. If we didn't have Mike Hartman on the team, we might not have won the Stanley Cup because every single person was so important in the combination that we had to win that Stanley Cup. So I'm really proud of the fact that we won, yes, but I'm even more proud of the fact that everybody felt a part of that Stanley Cup championship.
And we are going to hear more from Ranger players and personnel within the organization. But first, let's hear from our friends at the Game 7 group. Game 7 has a magic attached to it like nothing in sport. In order to prevail, teamwork is essential to achieving success. At the Game 7 group, transforming individuals into cohesive teams is the core philosophy in their team building approach. Their belief is every team has potential to achieve extraordinary results. Game 7 Group offers various services to help teams accomplish their goals through specific team building events, coaching, and speaking engagements. These services are aimed at improving team dynamics, productivity, and overall performance. Face it, we all want to be able to succeed in the big moment. Check out the Game 7 Group website at game7group.com/NHL Wraparound to learn more. Right now, a special incentive offer awaits our podcast listeners. Take your team to the next step. The Game 7 Group will get you there. Welcome back to NHL Wraparound, special 5-part series of the New York Rangers 1994 Stanley Cup Championship, 1990 Forever. Along with Neil, we are joined by an author who wrote Losing the Edge, the rise and fall of the Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, and also covered the team in depth for the New York Daily News in 1994, Barry Meisel. And Barry, just covering this team and all of the storylines that were attached to it. An unbelievable journey for somebody who, like myself, grew up in the blue seats and winds up covering the team.
Yeah, it was amazing. There were 6 of us at the Daily News. We were all New Yorkers. We had all lived it. We had all endured the 54 years as fans, as writers. And for me, it got crazy in the sense that as an investigative sports reporter covering some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that was going on with Keenan and Neil and some of the things with the players and all of the behind-the-scenes stuff, I realized that here I am, the kid in me wants the Rangers to win so badly. The reporter in me wants to stay objective. And it was intense every single day because, especially in the semis and the finals, there was so much going on. There was so much to report. There were so many ups and downs, highs and lows. And at the same time, I'm the kid who I know my dad is going to every game. He's never seen the Stanley Cup. He's in his 60s. I want him to see a cup. We all want to see a cup. So it was just an absolutely wild time to maintain all of these levels of intensity. And 18 million New Yorkers were feeling the same thing for a variety of reasons. It was an incredible time.
What was the biggest single challenge that you had to deal with during that time? Because there was obviously the whole circus going around Mike Keenan with, benching players, pulling Mike Richter in the Devils series in Game 4. And then, of course, the rumor that he was talking to Detroit right between Game 6 and 7 of the final.
Well, the biggest challenge was getting the story right. Objectivity was easy. We are trained as professionals you could love a team. You could have a lifelong love affair with the team as a kid coming out of the blue seats. But we were hired and we were doing a job to present the story objectively to New York. I always said to myself, if I could go to bed each night, having written my story and knowing it's correct, I could live with myself. And covering Neil, who I knew real well at the time and knew him for many years before then, we talked about that often, that as long as I got the story right, I was going to write the story. And he respected that. I mean, among the many things he did well in running the team is he not just respected the media. A lot of executives respect the media, some don't. But Neil understood that even if the story was not going to help the Rangers or look fondly upon the Rangers, If the story was accurate, it had to be told. I think Messier was the same way. You know, right from the "you can't be afraid to slay the dragon," Messier took that tone from the locker room. They weren't afraid of bad stuff being reported because it was happening. And that, I think that's a small part from my view of the many, many parts. And guys, throughout this whole podcast, you've talked about everybody needed to do his job in order for the team to win the cup, the heave-ho mentality. I think from the repertorial side of it, the fact that the Ranger organization, top to bottom, didn't shrink from anything. The bad stuff, the good stuff, the real stuff, the Keenan craziness helped get over the hump. And it took everything, as you guys have been saying, throughout the series.
And Neil, that starts at the top with you. Just not flinching in the face of everything that was going on.
Well, yeah, and some of it is out of your control. You know, a lot of it is out of your control. But Barry's right in one thing, and it was intuitive to me that everybody had a job to do, and you couldn't get upset because somebody was doing their job. You had to respect that they were doing one job, you were doing another job. And the one thing that I always said was, don't lie. Like I said to myself, don't lie. It would be easy to lie to back then, the newspapers, because there was no online stuff or anything, but it would be easy. But you know what? If you got caught, which you would, then your credibility is down the drain. And my credibility was more important to me with the media than maybe a bad story, a bad opinion. And even when it was unfair, I looked and said, well, it's the New York Post. They have to write that way because it's the New York Post. They got to come out with some flamboyant thing to, you know, make you look good, make you look bad, or make you look good, or make it controversial or chaotic or something, which is sort of the very nature of New York City. Is they feed off of that chaotic environment of honking horns and running between cars and all this kind of stuff. So you got to embrace that. And I embraced it. I did. I embraced New York City and all that it was. And part of what it was the Daily News, Newsday, New York Times, and New York Post, and New York Star Ledger with our friend Walt McPeak. So those were good. In my opinion, and my memory, those were the best of times. Standing in the hallway talking to those guys, I loved it. I didn't shy away from it. I really loved it. And there were some guys that weren't out to do me any favors, but you had to take that. You had to take the good with the bad. There was also some really great people, like Barry, like John Delapina, like Frank Brown, like Walt McPeak. You know, there were a lot of really good people. Rick Carpinello, that were just. You wanted them as friends. You didn't necessarily see them as, just hockey writers. You considered them friends at the end of the day.
Well, let me refresh everybody's memory because, and I have Neil to thank for this, but he'll remember this, but the book, actually, the genesis of the book started when I came up to meet Neil halfway through the season and asked him, since I was the News's investigative sports reporter, I wanted to do a 30-day series, 30-day piece called Fly on a GM's Wall. Neil allowed me to embed myself with him. We left immediately after the All-Star game at the Garden, flew together on a West Coast trip, and I was able to, with Neil's permission, spend 30 days following him around. The agreement was the New York Daily News would run a 3-page series after the 30 days. And the only promise I had to make that if there was a trade that was percolating that wasn't done, that wouldn't be fair to report, I would not. But he allowed me to follow the team on the road. We went everywhere together and talked about, I was privy to the behind the scenes stuff. I was in on the draft meetings. Neil had his semi-annual draft meetings, and it laid the groundwork. At the time, we didn't know the team would win the cup, but it laid the groundwork because of my relationship with Neil, the mutual trust that I didn't do anything I didn't agree to. The Daily News published the piece, and there was some sticky things and things I'm sure Keenan didn't like, but it was fair. And then after we did the Cup, I used that 30-day relationship to lay the groundwork for eventually became Losing the Edge. Another thing to note is that Mike Keenan and I went back way, way back. I was a writer in the American Hockey League before I joined the Daily News. I worked in Binghamton, New York, when Mike coached in Rochester. And I wrote a column for the Hockey News in which I dealt with all the American Hockey League coaches. And Mike and I developed a relationship. So he also trusted me. So I felt I had a unique insight right throughout the season that carried over. And to Neil's point about he was friends with he trusted everybody. Everybody trusted him. And it was part of the whole aura around the team that everybody was pulling in the same direction, doing what they needed to do.
And to your point, Barry, the significance of this win extends beyond the team itself. And of course, the fans are involved. But a lot of the media also were really moved by this championship. And we're going to hear a few clips from them, starting with your colleague at the Daily News, Frank Brown.
Hi, I'm Frank Brown. As I stand in front of you today, I'm 71 years old, and the 1994 Stanley Cup was the only one the Rangers have won in my lifetime. It was my privilege and honor to cover it for the New York Daily News. But I'll tell you one story that's even better. Gary Bettman is 72. I worked with him for 20 years. The only Rangers Stanley Cup of his lifetime was the time he presented it to Mark Messier in 1994. What a memory.
Hi, I'm Joe Whalen, and I was lucky enough to be the producer of New York Rangers hockey in 1994. Without a doubt, that is the most special team I have ever covered. A great management team that gave us the freedom to tell the stories. Thank you, Neil. Great network team, management team to back us, and Mike McCarthy. It's just the best team I've ever covered, bar none. They were a team full of characters and a team full of character. And you know what? They won the Cup, and our MSG network coverage won a national award called the Cable Ace. So, you know what? What could be better than that? Nothing will ever match that experience from my end.
Hi, I'm Kenny Albert. 1994 meant so much to the passionate Rangers fans who waited generations for another Stanley Cup championship. Now, for me personally, I had the opportunity to call my first Stanley Cup final on the NHL radio network in 94, and to be in the Garden, the world's most famous arena, on June 14th was a night I'll never forget. But 5 nights earlier, on June 9th, I met my wife Barbara for the first time after Game 5. In fact, if the Rangers had won that game, we probably would never have met. So for me, 1994 will certainly last a lifetime.
Hey, I'm Steve Levy from ESPN, and I had a really rough childhood. I grew up in enemy territory, Long Island. And in fact, the 4 years that I was in high school, the 4 years the Islanders won the Stanley Cup in a row. And it seemed like every year they had to go through the Rangers to do it. So fast forward to 1994, and I still haven't seen the Rangers skate around Madison Square Garden with Lord Stanley's Cup because we were rights holders and the Rangers had a lead late. I had to already be in the Rangers dressing room setting up in the podium. And I got to talk to Adam Graves, but it was a long time. Imagine everything going on the ice. By the time the Rangers get to the dressing room, I've got Adam Graves standing next to me. And ESPN being ESPN, this was in June. We were in the middle of Cleveland Indians baseball highlights. And my producer, Tom McNeely, kept saying, hang on, be patient. And all the while, I feel bad. Adam Graves is standing here with me. And Gravy can see that I'm getting frustrated. And he leans over, pushes the microphone away, and he goes, hey, I realized how important this win, this Stanley Cup was for you too. And I was just blown away that he, in the greatest moment of his career, was thinking about what the Rangers Stanley Cup win meant to me. So that's the impact the 1994 Stanley Cup final the Rangers had on me. I drank from the Stanley Cup that night. Unprofessional, but I took the risk and it was worth it. I was one of the last people in the dressing room. Might have been 2 a.m. at Madison Square Garden. And I still can't find that picture. And I still haven't seen the Rangers skate around with Lord Stanley's Cup. Hoping I get one more shot at it.
Hi, Howie Rose here. So you want to know what the Rangers winning the Stanley Cup in 1994 meant to me? Well, let's look at it this way. I fell in love with hockey and the Rangers at age 12. That was back in 1966. When I was in high school, I became a season ticket holder for the Rangers. I would take my tape recorder to Madison Square Garden every now and then and practice doing play-by-play, dreaming that one day I would actually get to broadcast a Ranger game. Well, sure enough, down the road, I did become a Rangers broadcaster, and that night, June 14th, 1994, is something I'll remember for the rest of my life. I'll give you this much information, too. I hate the dentist. Can't stand going to the dentist. But you know what helps? When he's drilling or pulling or yanking or digging or doing whatever he's doing to aggravate me, I just close my eyes real tight. And I think of those final seconds of Game 7 against Vancouver and then being on the ice, doing interviews during the post-game celebration with some of the players, and then afterwards going into the Ranger locker room and drinking from the Stanley Cup. It doesn't get any better than that. So that's what 1994 means to me.
Hi, I'm Marv Albert, and it has been my good fortune to be able to be the broadcaster for the New York Rangers on WFAN in New York for some 30 years of Ranger hockey. At the time, in 94, I was also doing NBA on NBC, so it's going back and forth between the NBA Finals, between the Knicks and the Houston Rockets, and Ranger games. And I made it back for Game 7 with the Vancouver Canucks, winner to take the Stanley Cup. I've been a Ranger fan all my life. Grew up playing roller hockey in Brooklyn. My dad would take me to Ranger games over the years, even New York Rover games, for those of you who may remember who the Rovers were. They play at Madison Square Garden. But 54 years before the Rangers were able to win another cup. And I remember when the buzzer sounded, the crowd went wild, and heard the words that I said. I had to write it down off a recording. It's all over. The New York Rangers have won the Stanley Cup, something most people did not think that they'd see during the course of their lifetime. It was a great moment, and now it's 30 years since they won the Cup.
It's just extraordinary how the media actually felt about this because, you know, everybody's supposed to be objective, but it goes right back to the beginning. We're all fans first, Neil.
Well, that's the thing. And a lot of the voices and people that you're seeing, like the two of you guys, they were from the New York area. So the Rangers, an original 6 team, they had never won in most of these people's lifetime. And, you know, they couldn't help but be happy that their hometown team had won and that they saw something they never thought they would see. And, you know, I'm just thankful that I got to meet all these people. I had these long-term relationships. Howie Rose, when he was a stringer, I used to sit beside him in the press box below the blue seats in Madison Square Garden. And I can go on and on. I mean, how I met all these different guys. Paul Fichtenbaum, who's not on our show, but is a very well-known guy who was the head of Sports Illustrated for a long time, and now is high up in the Athletic website. I met him when he was just trying to start out. So those relationships last a long time when you're all equals. And I think, Barry, you can speak to this. I've always told kids when your best friends are going to be those friends you had when none of you had any money and everybody was arguing over who would pay for the pizza. So, and they'll be your friends forever, much more so than the guys that come into your life once you're making a lot of money.
Yeah, I bet that's what makes the job, the reporting versus the rooting versus the objectivity versus the subjectivity so tough. And that's part of what made those moments and that night. And, I can't stop thinking now about June 14th because I remember waking up and I remember having the entire day. And I was one of these guys, I would get to the rink 6 hours in advance and prepare. And you're worried. You're seriously trying to do your job. You're doing your pregame stories. You're preparing for your postgame stories. At the Daily News, there were 6 of us. We met for about an hour, about 4 hours before every game. If this happens, here's what we'll do, X, Y, and Z. And each of us was assigned certain things on each night. And between the pressure and the excitement and the nervousness, it was no different than the guys in the blue seats to the guys downstairs who were spending $10,000 a ticket to the players on the ice. New York was literally all in it together, no matter where you were coming from, no matter what the angle was. And I'm not sure I've ever seen that before in professional sports.
We've all got unique stories from this. And I'm sure that all of our listeners can identify with so many things that they have heard before, that they're hearing now. And, even, for myself, during that championship run, I kept my dad from attending Game 7. So we had been together to watch games 3 times during the course of the 1994 championship run. We watched on television together. We watched Game 1 of the Devils series, loss. We were at the Garden together for Game 5 of the Devils series, loss. After the 4th game in Vancouver, I had Neil and I, our mutual buddy, John Saunders, actually reached out to Neil. Neil got my dad a press pass. Wasn't quite having to run through the gauntlet to get credentials as it is nowadays. He gets him in, and my dad is sitting in the corner. He's sitting with John. He's sitting with Barry Melrose, and we know what happened. So it comes back for Game 7, and I said, Dad, I don't think we could do this because we won't be able to live with ourselves if they lose. And of course, that they won. And I said, look, if they win, then we will celebrate for years to come. And indeed, we did that. What do you guys got that's just unique that, people would completely appreciate?
I've got a couple. So I had season tickets. My family had season tickets. I had 8 tickets for the game. And it was a question of family, extended family. My son was 3, my daughter was 1, so they weren't a factor. But I actually got 13 people into the building with the 8 tickets. Not saying how, I'm not revealing my sources. And I had 2 actual tickets that people got in without using their tickets hours before the game. I was offered $5,000 a ticket from people who knew I still had 2 available. Would not sell them. I thought that would be bad luck. If I took the money for tickets, I thought that was going to be a jinx. So I still have 2 perfectly uncut tickets. I got 0 for them. Would not do that. That was the fan in me. The reporter in me, my pregame story was on Keenan's dalliances with the Red Wings. So on the night of Game 7, I'm still writing. That was my early story. I was assigned to cover Keenan and Messier afterwards. And I was obviously knowing that one way or the other, that was going to be an incredibly intense time. And then the final thing, I was sitting on this one sentence. I was assigned to write the notes column, the notes that you put together after the story. And I couldn't wait. And I kept memorizing. And I said, if they win tonight, the first line of my notes column was going to be, and if you look it up, it is, the New York Islanders have not won the Stanley Cup since 1983. And I loved, that was the favorite sentence I typed the entire time.
Neil, what do you got?
Well, I've pretty much told most of the stories that I can remember. I think that a lot of it's in a fog because, I don't remember how I got my mom there. I don't remember how a lot of things happened because I think I was in such a state of worry and hopefulness and so on. But I do remember that I had it prearranged that if we were ahead with 5 minutes to go, that Al Young, the head of security, would come and get me and bring me down to where my mom was. So that, I could enjoy the buzzer going with my wife and with my mom. And he did that. And the funny part is that when they called the icing, when Bure stopped skating, and if you watch the video, everybody in the building knew that should be waved off then. And in fact, Leach saw him stop skating and threw a stick up in the air to go back to hug Richter when the whistle blew and they called it icing. There are pictures of him with the stick way up in the air. Anyway, my wife was crying and people were worried. And to calm myself down, I kept saying to them, 1.3 seconds, they never score in this situation. They never score. I kept saying it over and they never score. It's okay. They never score. But, I was really saying it to myself more than I was saying it to anybody else. More like, don't worry, settle yourself down. And I think everybody does that to themselves to settle themselves down at huge moments like that. But, then the buzzer went and the fireworks went and all the stuff started. And I'll tell you one thing, guys, it goes by way too fast. Way too fast. I mean, I wish I could have had it in slow motion rather than in full motion because, boy, it's gone in the blink of an eye.
It has. And, just standing up and I was doing stats for ESPN up in their booth and I could almost get this fearful image because the team had been tied 3 times in the last minute during the course of the semis and the finals of Bure somehow getting a one-timer off the face-off past Richter. But of course that didn't happen. I threw off my headset and I actually jumped on JD's back before their stage manager pulled me away. That's how exciting it was. So it's just, the memories of this have been fabulous. And Barry, just want to thank you so much for joining and sharing your stories with us today.
My pleasure, Vic. Thanks, Neil.
Thanks, Bear. It's been great. It brings back, it's cathartic. It puts you right back there again.
And the beautiful thing is we'll be doing this the rest of our lives. So please have me back for the 60th.
Okay.
We're going to do that. But first, here's a word from our sponsor.
Time now for a quick shout out to our sponsor. NHL Wraparound is brought to you by MyGray, your source for game-worn jerseys. Head to mygray.com to get your collection started today. Get real, get it from MyGray. NHL Wraparound subscribers can take 10% off any hockey jersey when they order at mygray.com and use the coupon code WRAP10. Don't forget that coupon code WRAP10.
Welcome back to NHL Wraparound 1990 Forever, the 5th and final episode in our 1994 tribute to the Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, joined by Neil Smith. And Neil, we'd be remiss if we did not remember some of the folks that are near and dear to the New York Ranger organization that have passed since that championship. Locker room attendant Benny Patrizzi, equipment managers Mike Folga and Joe Murphy, and defenseman Alexander Karpovtsev, who perished in a plane crash playing for a Russian team in 2011. And I think it's also important we recognize fans like Seal Seidel, who's a longtime Ranger fan club member and season ticket holder, and she lost her life in 1994 during the Capitol Series, I believe. And of course, Officer Stephen McDonald, who was shot in the line of duty, who we lost in 2017. And now, on a more personal note, your mom, Morg, who really got you into hockey at a very early age.
Yeah, if it wasn't for my mom, I wouldn't be sitting here today because she had a great love of hockey that was passed down to her from her dad, who emigrated to Canada from England at the beginning of the 1900s. And she was really into hockey, really into watching hockey, a great fan, a great fan. And one of the many blessings I was given in this life was the fact that I could help win a Stanley Cup right in front of my mother, so that her son was a Stanley Cup champion before she passed over. And what about your dad? I know your dad was a big Ranger fan too, Vic.
My dad, who lost in 2016, and from an early age, he had me ingrained in hockey. Took me to my first game in 1968, and I was hooked after that very first night. But little did I know how much effect it was going to have on me, because I started playing street hockey after that, and then ice hockey after that, and played a little in college, and just had a wonderful career covering the NHL for 3 different stints with ESPN. And now, you and I are doing a podcast together. So it all comes back to him and the start that he gave me as a fan. And as we said at the top of the show, we're all fans at heart. And we want to begin wrapping up the show by hearing from some of our fans that sent clips in. And let's first hear from Sal Galiotto.
What do the 1994 Rangers mean to me? Well, I've been a Ranger fan since 1964. The Rangers mean a lot in the sports world to me. But what I remember most is going through all those years with the Islanders winning Stanley Cup after Stanley Cup, the chants of 1940, the arrogant smugness of the Islander fans. And then came that 94 team, an incredible team with people like Mark Messier and Brian Leach, a team that was a team almost of destiny. And I remember with my kids, they were little, rooting on the team throughout that entire Stanley Cup series. The Messier guarantee, the defeat of the Devils, and then the Game 7 win over Vancouver. It changed everything. Suddenly, the 1940 chants went away. The smug Islander fans were cut down a big peg. That team was so special, and so many Ranger fans will never forget that night. Go Rangers.
Here's Mark Schumann. Wow, 1994 forever for sure. I can't believe it's been 30 years. I think back, I was only 20. I didn't really have any concept of what 54 years in 1940 meant and all that heartache, but I certainly do now when you look back at it and basically what we just kind of went through, thinking we had a chance to maybe win again here. I was driving through Manhattan coming back from work in Islander country on my way home to New Jersey, and everyone was on the streets at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, honking horns, running in the street. What an awesome, awesome moment when you look back at it. It brought such joy. I didn't think I'd have to wait this long for a second one. Hopefully there's one more release coming. Neil, thank you very much for being the architect of an amazing team and so much part of my childhood. Let's go Rangers.
Hi, my name is Bobby Ninsel, and I would just like to say 1994 New York Ranger fan, what it meant to me was the ultimate in success. What else could be? Lifting the Stanley Cup with Mark Messier and that great team. I've been a Ranger fan since 1968. And I have to say I was introduced to that sport by someone I love very much, my older brother. I went to my first game. We actually beat the Chicago Blackhawks 4-0. And then since the time that took place, it was, 26 years? All heartbreak. All the games, all the playoffs, all the maybes, nothing. But in 1994, we did it all. And that's what it means to me And it means a great deal because my dad was a Brooklyn Dodger fan. And being a Brooklyn Dodger fan, it was always wait till next year. So 1994 wasn't wait till next year.
Hi, my name is Paul Selvin. I'm with my sons, Jason and Alex. We've been Ranger fans for a long time. I grew up on Long Island with all those Islander teams that tormented my childhood. So certainly 1994 was an incredible year where we finally brought home a championship and silenced the 1940 chants. It was a few years thereafter that I finally got my season tickets, and I've been bringing my boys since an early age to cheer on the Rangers and hopefully bring home another cup. In fact, I have pictures of them at their first Ranger games on the Jumbotrons, and it's been a very meaningful experience for our family.
My name is Dan Huth, and I'm a Ranger fan. What does 1994 mean to me? I think it's meant different things to me at different times in my life. Originally, in 1994 was the first time, having been a big sports fan growing up as a kid, that I got to experience a championship. And there's no other time in my life where I can remember with precision exactly what I was doing and where I was doing it. And it was just such an incredible time to be a part of it. I can remember everything about the night being in the building. This is the jersey I wore that day. I still have it. I wore it for the bar exam. I wore it for the CPA exam. It's my good luck charm and always has been. I feel like there's so many lessons that came from it. What Messier did. You can see I'm wearing his jersey. I still have it hanging on my wall. For a guy I don't even know, has such a tremendous impact on my life in terms of what he did on the ice and some of the leadership lessons I take off the ice from it. And now it really means a lot to me in my house. I can look back at that as one of the happiest times where it was nothing but joy, but it's often the case when you look back at happy times in your life, it brings a lot of tears. And I can think back on that time very fondly and get very emotional about it, which my family loves to make fun of me for. And now today, it's really about me and my son, who I'm going to drag into the picture. I took him to his first Rangers game when he was 3, and I don't have a bucket list. I have a bucket item. It's to see the cup with him again and experience that once more.
My name is James Beal. I've been a Ranger fan for as long as I can remember. I grew up in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, and my father and my 2 brothers kind of brought me up to be a Ranger fan. What the 1994 Stanley Cup meant to me was so much. I was 17, graduating from Severian High School in Brooklyn, and my beloved Rangers were making a deep run in the playoffs. The excitement of the city, the excitement of Madison Square Garden, on games when certainly they were at home, but even nights when they were on the road and we were watching the game in the Garden, the energy was amazing.
My name is Woody Flowers. I'm 82 years old, and I've been a Rangers fan since I was 7, when my Canadian-born grandfather shared Ranger radio broadcasts with me. By 1994, I had a group of 4 partners in my law firm who shared a 3-ticket Rangers subscription. I smartly took tickets to the first 3 home games of the finals, but of course there was a 4th. Afterwards, my wife framed for me the New York Times article the next day. I have kept that framed article on my desk, first at work and now at home ever since.
My name is Ron Franzese, and I've been a Ranger fan since the 1950s. In the spring of 1994, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, and for a while, we didn't quite know what the prognosis was. And at one dark time during the playoffs, I thought, these mothers are not going to win the Stanley Cup during my lifetime. And then they won. And obviously, 30 years later, the cancer turned out not to be as bad as we thought. But I'm hoping that I don't have to get cancer again for them to win another Stanley Cup. Let's go Rangers.
Hello, my name is Paul McDonald. I'm 76 years old. I'm a native New Yorker and lifelong Rangers fan. I went to my first Rangers game when I was 9 years old in 1957. My dad took me to Madison Square Garden. I played roller hockey in Brooklyn and ice hockey all over the tri-state area. June 14, 1994 was certainly the height of being a Rangers fan. I remember it was a very pleasant evening. Most people had their windows open, and when the game was over, you could hear the roar go up through my Manhattan neighborhood as everyone screamed and clapped. But what I really remember about that evening is when the game was over and Mark Messier jumping up and down on the ice like a kid. He was epitomizing the way he felt, as well as all Ranger fans.
Hi, Bill Carroll here, lifelong Ranger fan. Since 1971, when I was 9 years old. Fell in love with the gag line, goal of game, Hatfield, Rattel, Gilbert. Waiting for that Stanley Cup until it finally came in 1994 when I had a 1-year-old son. I was 31 then. He's 31 now. I'm 62 years old, and I haven't had a cup since 1994. When I held him up in front of that TV and I said, son, I hope they get a lot more of these, but this might be the only one. Take it in. I tell him that story all the time. I don't think he remembers, but I'll tell you what he does remember. He's 31 years old. He hasn't had a cup since. When Sam Rosen said at the end of that famous 7th game in 1994, this one will last a lifetime, I didn't think he'd be right. But 31 years later, I'm still waiting. So 1994 is a cherished memory, and I hope it happens again soon.
My name's Arthur Ninsel. I attended my first Ranger game in 1962 in November, Andy Heberton night. I am still a season ticket holder for over 50 years in my current seats. What the 1994 Stanley Cup meant to me was a great healing of all the teenage and young adulthood rooting and disappointment from the Red Berenson goalpost to the Bobby Orr defeats in 70 and 72 to the disgrace in Philadelphia in 1974 to finally win and to have that championship come home. I think the best expression is when the woman held up the sign, "Now I can die in peace." Now I'm a 74-year-old 30 years later, and I hope we can do it one more time. Let's go, Rangers.
Right now, let's hear some more clips from members of the New York Ranger organization. This time we're going to start with goaltender Glenn Healy.
The 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, the unthinkable, impossible, improbable, we found a way to do it. And through the leadership of Neil Smith and all the people that were part of that organization, we erased 3 generations of misery that didn't see a championship in New York. And yes, the Rangers, we made 11 million people really happy, and probably more worldwide, but none happier than probably the 40 or so people that were part of that organization. And those memories, they'll last a lifetime. And, you know, the one thing that stands out to me is when you get your name on the Stanley Cup, it's your last name. They don't put your first name. And so when I go to the Hall of Fame, I look at the sacrifice my family made for me to get my name on the cup, the sacrifice the team, the organization made for my last name to go on the cup. But none more proud than my family that made those same sacrifices, that can go and look at that last name and say, that's my dad, that's my granddad, it's my brother, and it's going to be on there forever. Doesn't come off. So I'm so proud of that group, proud of New York, and so proud to say I'm part of the Stanley Cup team in New York, the 1994 Stanley Cup New York Rangers.
Hi, my name is Bruce LaFury, commonly known as Bruce the Masseuse back in the day. What the 94 season meant to me was probably a little different than what it meant to most. When I was hired, I didn't follow hockey, and I barely followed sports. And that's not to take away from the fact that I loved working for the New York Rangers for 30 years. To win in any city is pretty great. But to win in New York City is pretty epic. And I swear you could have powered New York State from the energy that was created by that win. this. The day I had the cup, and back then they just handed you the cup, I wanted to bring it through the town that I grew up in. And I remember walking down Main Street, cup in hand, and traffic was stopping. And I thought to myself, what is the attraction to this thing? I didn't get it. And it wasn't until months later that I realized that I was part of something very special in that 94 season, and that what I experienced, I could bring with me for the rest of my life.
Hi, this is John Rosasco. 1994 to me was a moment in time, a season in New York sports history that will forever stand on its own. I remember reading before the 25th anniversary, someone wrote, "For one brief shining moment, there was Camelot." And I thought that was perfect. I thought that captured what this team was and what it meant to New York City. The personalities on that team were just so big. And that team captured the city in just such a magical way. The team was dominant. The team led the NHL pretty much wire to wire. And it was just a ride that for those of us that were there and those of us that got to be part of that we'll never, ever forget.
Steve Larmer here, but played on the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers. And I guess my greatest memory from that year and the playoff run was just the incredible teammates that I got to share this experience with, having the privilege of playing with a Kevin Lowe and a Mark Messier, a Brian Leach, and Esa Tikkanen, Jeff Bukaboom, Joey Kosher, Greg Gilbert, to have gone through that 2 months and almost playing 28 games to win the Stanley Cup was certainly challenging and just an incredible experience. I'll never forget one of the things that stands out the most for me is the ticker tape parade through the Canyon of Champions or whatever they called it, and all the shredded paper that came out. It was like, to have been able to experience that once in my lifetime, was worth my time playing in New York, with the most incredible teammates. And that's something that I'll never forget. And I think every time that we get to run into each other and reminisce about it, the stories just get better. So it was an honor and a privilege to play in that city and with these guys.
Hey everybody, it's Eddie Olczyk, and when I think about 1994 and the journey, I just think about the individuals of from our management team to our coaching staff to our trainers and my beloved teammates that we lived and loved together, both on and off the ice. And anytime I hear the city, New York, anytime I see the Ranger sweater, anytime I go to New York or I go to Madison Square Garden, there isn't a Ranger fan, or I don't come across somebody that says to me, "Hey, thanks for 1994." And I think the greatest accomplishment is that we made a lot of people happy back in 1994. And still to this day, they talk about it. And I'm so proud of being able to have been a very small part of that team.
Hi, Nick Kyprios from the 1994 Stanley Cup Championship Hockey Club. It's hard to believe, almost 30 years as we enter this spring. But I can tell you one thing, 30 years or not, it feels like yesterday. It was quite the life-altering experience for me personally. And of course, didn't play a big role like a Mark Messier, Brian Leach, or Mike Richter. But the beauty of our team is you didn't have to play a big role to feel like you were part of something special. And I think that's what the most important thing is for every team entering this spring of being one of 16 is whatever part you have to play, you check your ego at the door and you do whatever it takes to help the team win, because it does truly last a lifetime. It opened up many doors for me. Just being told that you're a Stanley Cup champion means the difference to people wanting to be associated with you or not. People want to be around people that know how to win or have the right attitude to win. That's what being a Stanley Cup champion is all about. That's what 1994 did for me.
Hello, my name is Kevin Lowe, and I was so fortunate to win a cup in New York in 1994. I had the good fortune of winning a number of Stanley Cups in my career, and I often say when people ask me what's my favorite cup, I often say, or I always say, the first is always, it's like having children, the first is the one that sort of stands out the most, not that it's any better. It was special to win a fifth cup in Edmonton after Wayne Gretzky had left. And of course, the cup in New York in 1994. When they ask me, the favorite, I'd say they're all sort of equally memorable. New York, given the fact that the Rangers hadn't won in 54 years, original six team with so many great players, great teams over the years, and hard to believe that a team could go that long without winning. But as well, being able to do it with my former roommate and one of my best friends of all time, Mark Messier, and knowing how much it meant to Mark. It meant a lot to me as well, but knowing how much it meant to him was the 94 experiences will always go down as certainly in my greatest memories.
Neil, you're the architect, president, the GM, and hopeful that during the course of this show and really this entire series, we have been able to capture everything from the organization, the media, the fans, just how much this championship meant. And you're really the guy that made it happen.
Yeah, I was blessed with getting this job back in 1989. And I had a lot of blessings along the way. I've usually called it a lot of good luck along the way. There was a lot of luck, but people don't like when you say I was lucky. So I'm just going to say I was blessed, because you have to be one to be the other. But I was blessed to be in the position at the right time, to make the right moves, to have the support above me, to have a terrific fan base, to be able to acquire Mark Messier, which is the major piece in this whole thing coming together. And I had a lot of blessings. And for a kid that grew up in the 60s playing street hockey and learned to skate and had my mother, pushing me all the way along because my father died when I was very young, to be that guy that did that, you want to look in the mirror and say, was that really me? Because it's just a blessing. And for me to be able to bring joy to so many New Yorkers I can't describe how good that feels to me. I mean, I get the gift out of it. I get the gift that I got to give people happiness. And what better thing can happen in your life than to make others happy? And so that's where I'm the most proud.
And I can tell you firsthand, partner, how happy you made me, my entire family. And so on behalf of everybody, thank you. And that will now wrap up our 5-part series. Thanks to Barry Meisel for joining us today. Thank you to My Gray and the Game 7 group. And on behalf of Neil, we hope this series of shows serves as a go-to for years to come. Whether the Rangers win another cup in our lifetimes remains to be seen. What is certain is 1994 is forever. Thanks for joining us. I'm Vic Morren.
Thanks for joining us on the NHL Wraparound podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all the NHL action.